My name is William, and I'm going to tell you a story that changed my entire life. Not the way I expected it to, but in a way that forced me to see reality clearly for the first time in years. This is a story about love, betrayal, greed, and what happens when you finally decide that enough is enough. It's a story about a woman named Sarah, a marriage that crumbled from the inside out, and 2 pages that became the most important documents I've ever held. I'm going to be completely honest with you, because that's the only way this story means anything. I was born in a small town in the Midwest. My father worked at a manufacturing plant for 32 years. He'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning, drink his coffee black, and head out before the sun came up. He came home every single day at 5:15, his work shirt stained with sweat, his hands rough like tree bark. He never complained. Not once that I can remember. My mother worked part-time as a nurse's assistant, and she stretched every dollar like she was performing magic. She'd make meals that fed 4 kids on what most people spend on a single restaurant dinner. I watched my parents, and something deep inside me made a promise. I was going to do better. Not because they failed or because I was ashamed of them, but because I wanted to prove to myself that hard work actually meant something. When I was 18, I got my first job landscaping. I saved every penny. By 22, I had enough to start my own small landscaping business. I worked 7 days a week. No vacation. No days off. My hands bled. My back hurt constantly. I did that for 3 years straight, sleeping only 5 hours a night, so I could take on more clients. By 25, I sold that business. The money wasn't enormous, but it was enough to start something bigger. I invested in real estate, 1 property, then another, then 5. By 30, I had a property management company that was doing remarkably well. I was making more money than my father had made in his entire life, and I was only 30 years old. The work never stopped. It just got more sophisticated. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning. I'd check emails while making coffee. I'd be in the office by 6. I'd show properties, handle tenant issues, review contracts, manage finances. I'd come home at 8 or 9 at night and work until midnight answering messages and planning the next day. This was my life. This was my entire life. And I was good at it. Really good at it. By my early 30s, I had a multi-million-dollar portfolio. I had properties across 3 states. I had liquid assets in the bank that most people would never see in a lifetime. But I was completely and utterly alone. I didn't notice it at first because I was too busy to notice it. Then one day, I realized I had no one to share any of it with. I'd go out to nice restaurants alone. I'd travel to close deals alone. I'd sit in my condo and look at my bank statements alone. And it occurred to me that all of this, all of the work, all of the sacrifice, all of the sleepless nights, was just accumulating an account that meant nothing to me without someone to share it with. That's when I met Sarah. It was at my friend Marcus's wedding. I wasn't planning to stay long. I had work emails to respond to, but I was standing near the bar, holding a glass of champagne I wasn't drinking, probably looking as uncomfortable as I felt when she walked up to me. "You look like you're being held hostage at this wedding," she said, smiling. "Want to escape?" Her name was Sarah, and she was beautiful in a way that wasn't obvious. She wasn't the most conventionally pretty woman in the room, but there was something about her, an ease, a presence. She had dark hair and intelligent eyes, and when she talked, she actually made eye contact. She actually listened. "What do you do?" she asked me. I told her about real estate, about my properties, about my business, and she listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pull out her phone. She asked follow-up questions. She seemed genuinely interested. When I asked what she did, she told me she was a teacher. Elementary school. 3rd grade. "I love it," she said. "My kids are 8 years old. They're discovering the world. They're learning that effort matters, that kindness matters. It's the best job I could possibly have." I remember thinking, this is the kind of woman I want to spend my life with. Someone who understands that life isn't just about money. Someone with purpose. Someone with a real heart. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night. I called her the next day, which was unusual for me. I wasn't the type to pursue women. I was too focused, too driven. But something about Sarah had stuck with me. We went to dinner that Friday, then again the next Friday. Within 2 months, we were seeing each other regularly. Within 6 months, she moved into my condo. I loved her. I thought I loved her, anyway. Looking back now, I'm not entirely sure what I felt was love. It was more like relief. Relief that I finally had someone come home to. Relief that I wasn't alone anymore. Relief that all of my work finally had a purpose beyond just accumulating numbers in a bank account. After a year of dating, I proposed. It wasn't romantic. I didn't get down on one knee at sunset or anything like that. I brought the ring home one evening, and I told her I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. She cried and said yes, and I felt this surge of happiness that I'd never experienced before. This is what it was all about. I thought, this is why I worked so hard. We planned the wedding for 6 months out. During that time, Sarah told me she wanted to quit her job. She said she wanted to focus on us, on building a life together. I said okay immediately. I could afford to support both of us. I had plenty of money. In fact, I wanted to take care of her. I wanted to provide the way my father had provided for my mother. It seemed like the natural thing to do. Take a year off, I told her. Figure out what you really want to do with your life. Don't worry about money. I've got it. I think that moment was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it at the time. The wedding was beautiful. We got married on a Saturday in June. About 200 people came. It was expensive, probably $40,000. But I didn't care. Sarah looked radiant. I felt like the luckiest man alive. We went to Bora Bora for our honeymoon. 2 weeks. Just the two of us. When we came back, things started to shift. It was subtle. So subtle, I almost didn't notice it. Sarah would mention something she'd seen. A friend of hers had a bigger house in a nicer neighborhood. We drove past a mansion one day, and she said, "Wouldn't that be amazing to live there?" Not in a joking way. In a way that sounded like a question, like a suggestion, like something she thought I should fix. Over the next few months, the comments increased. "Did you see that new Mercedes?" It was beautiful. My friend Jennifer just got back from Paris. They rented this incredible apartment. That new neighborhood has really nice homes. I've been reading about it. I started to pay attention. I started to suggest we look at bigger houses. Sarah's eyes would light up. Suddenly, we were touring properties. Suddenly, we were making offers. Suddenly, we were moving into a $4 million mansion with 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, and a home gym that cost more to build than most houses. I was proud of that house. It represented everything I'd worked for. It was a physical manifestation of my success. I thought Sarah would be happy there. I thought that would be enough. But within 3 months, she wanted to renovate. "The kitchen is dated," she said. "The floors are boring. We need to update this place. Make it beautiful." We hired a designer, an expensive one. She cost $15,000 just to design the renovations, and then the actual work cost $300,000 more. New kitchen with marble counters, new flooring throughout, new lighting fixtures, new everything. When the final bill came in, I felt a flutter of panic in my stomach. $300,000. That was more than most people made in a lifetime. But I didn't say anything. I signed the check. Over the next few years, I watched my wife slowly become someone I didn't recognize. It happened gradually, like watching someone change so slowly that you don't notice until one day you look at them and think, when did this happen? She started buying jewelry. Expensive jewelry. Not one nice watch, multiple watches. Not one diamond ring. 7 or 8. Handbags that cost $10,000 each. I didn't even know handbags could cost that much. When I asked her about it, she got defensive. "You can afford it," she'd say. "Why shouldn't I have nice things? Other women have these things. Their husbands actually care about making them happy." She started getting treatments. Facials every week. Massages. Hair treatments. Botox. A personal trainer. A nutritionist. A stylist who would come to the house and help her pick out clothes. I was paying for all of it. Thousands and thousands of dollars every month. Just for her to maintain herself. She made friends. Not the kind of friends she had when she was a teacher. These were women like her. Women who were married to successful men. Women who defined themselves by what their husbands had purchased for them. They'd come to the house, and I'd listen to them talk, and it was like listening to a different species. They talked about their jewelry. They talked about their vacations. They compared their husband's net worth like it was a game. They talked about other women who didn't have as much, and they talked about them with this kind of pity mixed with contempt. Sarah started dressing differently. She wore designer clothes exclusively. She got her nails done twice a week. She spent hours on her appearance. And when we'd go out to dinner or to events, she'd make comments about what other women were wearing. She'd notice if someone was wearing last season's handbag. She'd say things like, "Can you believe she wore that? Doesn't she have any taste?" Or, "That watch is at least 5 years old. I wonder if she can't afford a new one." I started to feel disgusted, but I also started to feel like it was my fault. Maybe if I'd given her what she wanted, she wouldn't be like this. Maybe if I bought her the right things, she'd be happy. So I bought more things. A second house in Colorado, a vacation property in Florida, a new car for her every other year, jewelry that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, designer clothes by the dozens, vacations to Europe, to Asia, to anywhere she wanted to go. I was literally paying for her to become someone I didn't like. And through it all, there was this constant refrain, "I sacrifice for you." She'd say it whenever I pushed back, whenever I questioned a purchase or suggested we slow down on spending. She'd hit me with those words. "I gave up my career for you. I sacrificed my life for you. I stood by you while you were building all of this. I deserve to have nice things. I deserve to be happy." Except I was the one paying for her happiness. I was the one providing everything. And she was the one spending like the money would never run out. By year 4 of our marriage, things had gotten bad, really bad. Sarah would spend days shopping without telling me. She'd come home with thousands of dollars of purchases. She'd buy things, use them once, and then forget about them. I found a closet that had 40 pairs of shoes still in their boxes, tags attached. 40 pairs of shoes for a woman with 2 feet. She spent money on things I'd never even seen. I'd get credit card statements, and there would be charges to stores I didn't recognize. When I'd ask her about them, she'd get angry. "Why are you checking up on me? Why are you monitoring me? You're being controlling. If you really love me, you wouldn't care what I spent." So I stopped asking. I just paid the bills. But something was happening inside me. Something dark was growing. I started to resent her. Not just the spending, but her presence in my home. The way she talked, the way she treated people, the housekeeper, the gardener, people who made far less money than her and therefore, in her mind, weren't worth basic human respect. I started sleeping in a separate bedroom. It was supposedly temporary. My back was bothering me. I needed a different bed, but it wasn't temporary. Once I moved into that other room, I never moved back. Sarah didn't even seem to care. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't try to talk about it. She just let me leave, and then she threw herself into more spending, more treatments, more activities that had nothing to do with me. We became roommates who happened to be married. By year 6, I was miserable. I'd wake up dreading the day. I'd come home and feel anxiety in my chest. I'd look at her and feel nothing. No love, no attraction, no connection. Just a hollow sense of having made a terrible mistake. I started thinking about divorce. Not constantly, but regularly. I'd be at work, and I'd think about it. I'd be driving, and I'd think about it. I'd be lying in bed at night, unable to sleep, and I'd think about it. I'd run through the scenarios. What would it cost? What would she ask for? How complicated would it be? But I didn't act on it. I was scared. I was scared of the legal battle. I was scared of what she might take from me. I was scared of failing again. Because I'd already failed once at this marriage. What if I failed at the divorce too? It took something specific to push me over the edge. I was going through some files in my office at home, looking for a property deed I needed, when I found her laptop. It was open on my desk. I don't know why I looked at it. I wasn't trying to spy on her. But the screen was right there, and I saw an email notification pop up. It was from someone named Michael Richardson. Michael Richardson, the financial advisor. I only knew who he was because Sarah had mentioned meeting him at a party. She'd said he was interesting and had good ideas about money. I shouldn't have done it. I know I shouldn't have done it. But I opened her email, and I felt my world tilt. The emails between Sarah and Michael went back almost a year. They'd been meeting for consultations, coffee meetings, lunch meetings. They'd been discussing my finances, my properties, my assets, my projections for the future. But it wasn't romantic. It was transactional. In one email, Michael wrote, "Based on what you've told me about his net worth and income, you could potentially be looking at a significant settlement if you decided to pursue separation. Have you given that any thought?" Sarah's response: "I think about it all the time, but I don't know how much I could actually get. What percentage do you think is realistic?" Michael: "In cases like this, depending on how long the marriage lasts and whether there was a prenuptial agreement, we've seen women walk away with anywhere from 30 to 70%. You'd have a strong case if you could demonstrate that you contributed to building his wealth while sacrificing your own career." Sarah: "I did. I was a teacher when we met. I gave up everything for him." Michael: "Exactly. That sacrifice is valuable. And the judge will see it that way too." I must have read those emails 50 times. I printed them. I made copies. I sat in my office with the printed pages in my hands, and I felt something break inside me, not in an angry way, in a shock way, like I'd been punched and was only just feeling the impact. She'd planned this. She'd planned to take my money all along. This wasn't a marriage that had failed. This was a scheme. This was a con, and I was the mark. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about everything. Every time she'd said she loved me. Every time she'd promised to be by my side. Every vacation. Every piece of jewelry. Every expensive dinner. It was all part of a plan to extract money from me. The next morning, I called a divorce lawyer. And I made a decision that I've never regretted. I decided to collect evidence. For the next 4 months, I documented everything. I worked with my accountant to pull together comprehensive financial records. I took screenshots of credit card statements showing Sarah's spending. Thousands of dollars a week on designer clothes, jewelry, treatments, restaurants. I compiled a spreadsheet showing her annual spending. Over $2 million a year. $2 million on things she didn't need. I worked with a private investigator to document her meetings with Michael. Photos of them having lunch. Records of phone calls. Nothing that would constitute infidelity. There was no romantic relationship, but evidence of a financial conspiracy. I got access to her therapy records through my lawyer, and in those records, I found gold. She told her therapist that she married me because I was financially successful, and that she'd known from early on that she'd marry him and eventually take half of what he had. She'd said that she saw other women in her social circle who had secured their financial future through marriage and divorce, and she wanted to do the same. Those records were like a punch to the gut, but they were also clarifying. This wasn't about a marriage that had deteriorated. This was about a woman who had never loved me, who had never been capable of loving me, who had seen me as an asset. I also found detailed notes in her personal journal, which my lawyer was able to access. She'd written things like, "He's becoming suspicious. I need to accelerate my plans. If he leaves me, I want to make sure I'm the one getting the money." And Michael says if I can show that I've been a housewife and supported him emotionally, I can argue that I contributed to his success. I need to start saving evidence of that. She'd been documenting her own sacrifice, recording conversations, saving emails where I'd been impatient with her, to show I was difficult, building a case against me while I was trusting her. When I had everything I needed, I called my lawyer and told him I was ready to move forward. I told him I want to file for divorce. 2 weeks later, I told Sarah. We were sitting in the living room of the mansion. She was reading a magazine. I was sitting across from her. I said it simply and clearly. I want a divorce. She laughed. I remember that clearly. She actually laughed. She thought I was joking. When she realized I was serious, her face changed. The magazine fell from her hands. She stood up and walked to the window and stared out at the pool we never used. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "You're going to regret this for the rest of your life." I didn't respond. I just got up and walked out of the room. The legal process started immediately. Sarah's lawyer sent over a demand for settlement. 80% of everything. 80%. The reasoning was exactly what Michael had coached her on. She had sacrificed her career. She had been a housewife. She had supported me emotionally while I built my business. She deserved security. My lawyer looked at me across his desk and said, "Without a prenuptial agreement, she actually has some legal ground here. Not strong ground, but ground. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that you might lose 40 or 50%. 50%. Nearly $20 million. Gone. To someone who had spent it before she even earned it. But I was ready. I told my lawyer to tell the other side that I was willing to settle, that I didn't want a big fight, that I wanted to negotiate in good faith. Sarah's lawyer seemed pleased. He probably thought I was weak. He probably thought I'd cave and give her everything she wanted. But I wasn't being weak. I was being strategic. I was buying time. I spent the next 6 months preparing what would become the 2 pages that changed everything. The first page was a detailed timeline and financial analysis. I showed the progression of Sarah's spending. Year 1 of marriage, reasonable expenses. Years 2 and 3, spending starting to increase. Years 4 and 5, spending becoming lavish. Years 6 and 7, spending reaching obsessive levels. $2 million a year in the year leading up to the divorce filing. I showed every purchase, every designer handbag, every piece of jewelry, every treatment, every vacation. I calculated the cost of her lifestyle. I showed that she had spent more money in 7 years than most Americans made in a lifetime. Then I included documentation of her conversations with Michael Richardson. I included her therapy notes. I included her journal entries. I included phone records showing the frequency of her contact with her financial advisor. And I included analysis showing that her spending had accelerated dramatically once she began planning the divorce. The second page was different. It was a letter. I addressed it directly to the judge. I wrote, "Your Honor, I am not presenting this evidence to punish my wife. I am presenting it because I believe in fairness and justice. I worked for over 20 years to build what I have. I love this woman. I tried to give her everything I had. And in return, she deliberately planned to extract as much of my wealth as possible through divorce proceedings. This is not a case of a woman who sacrificed for her marriage. This is a case of a woman who married a man for money and then began planning her exit strategy almost from the beginning. She has documented this plan in emails, therapy notes, and personal journals. She has spent $2 million a year on luxury goods while knowing that she intended to divorce me and claimed that I had denied her financial security. I am asking not for revenge, but for balance. I am asking that my wife receive a fair settlement that acknowledges that she was, in fact, a housewife. But I am asking that the court recognize that being a housewife does not entitle someone to 80% of another person's lifetime of work. I request a fair and equitable division, taking into account not her claims of sacrifice, but her documented actions and intentions. I printed those 2 pages. I gave them to my lawyer. He read them, looked at me, and shook his head. "This is good," he said. "This is really good. But you need to understand, once we introduce this evidence, there's no going back. This divorce becomes acrimonious. She's going to know you've been investigating her. It's going to get ugly. It's already ugly," I said. "This just makes it honest." We scheduled the court date for October. The courtroom was exactly what I expected. Cold, gray, institutional. There was a judge I'd never seen before, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and a stern expression. There were court reporters and clerks and all the machinery of the legal system. Sarah sat across from me, and I was struck by how small she looked. She was wearing a tasteful dress. Nothing too expensive looking, nothing too flashy. She'd done her makeup carefully. She'd styled her hair in a way that made her look vulnerable. She was performing the role of the wronged wife. Her lawyer spoke first. He delivered essentially the same argument they'd been making all along. Sarah had sacrificed her career. She'd been a housewife. She'd supported her husband while he built his wealth. She deserved security. She deserved half of what had been built during their marriage. She deserved. My lawyer stood up and interrupted. He said the defendant wished to present additional evidence. He walked through it methodically. He showed the timeline of spending. He showed the credit card statements. He showed the financial analysis. Then he showed the emails between Sarah and Michael Richardson. The emails where she had explicitly discussed extracting money from me through divorce. The courtroom got very quiet. The judge leaned forward. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He asked for the therapy notes. He read them. Then he asked for the journal entries. He read those too. When my lawyer was finished, he handed the judge my 2-page letter. The judge read it slowly. I watched his face. He didn't show any emotion. Then, halfway through the second page, he smiled. Not a mean smile. Not a contemptuous smile. But a knowing smile. Like he'd seen this movie before, and he knew exactly how it was supposed to end. When he finished reading, he set the papers down and looked directly at Sarah's lawyer. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked. Sarah's lawyer stood up. He looked shaken. He tried to salvage the case. He argued that the emails were taken out of context, that the therapy notes were confidential and shouldn't have been used, that Sarah was a good woman who deserved to be taken care of. But the judge wasn't interested. He held up his hand. "I've been on this bench for 28 years, he said. "I've seen marriages fail for many reasons. Infidelity, abuse, incompatibility, growing apart. But I don't often see someone document their financial conspiracy in emails and therapy notes." He looked at Sarah directly. "You married a man you did not love. You married him for money. You documented that fact. You then began planning how to extract as much of that money as possible. That's not a marriage. That's fraud. That's not a sacrifice. That's a con." Sarah's face went white. Her lawyer put his hand on her arm. The judge continued. "The defendant will receive 30% of the marital assets. Not 80%. Not 50%. 30%. She'll also receive spousal support of $3,000 per month for 5 years. After that, support ends. She is a healthy, educated woman who is perfectly capable of supporting herself." He banged his gavel. It was over. When I left the courtroom, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt tired. Tired and sad and empty. I'd won, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like losing, just less than I could have lost. Sarah was taken care of. She'd get about $6 million, plus monthly support. Most people would consider that a successful outcome for her. But she wanted more. She wanted everything. In the weeks and months after the divorce was finalized, Sarah disappeared from my life. Her lawyer contacted mine, and the money was transferred. The house was sold. The property was divided. We were officially separated and then officially divorced. I kept the business. I kept most of the properties. I kept my sanity. What happened to Sarah? I heard she married again within 2 years. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd married a wealthy surgeon. I hope that man had a very good prenuptial agreement. I hope he learned from my mistakes. But I didn't spend much time thinking about Sarah. I was too busy thinking about myself. I didn't date for almost 2 years after the divorce was final. I didn't want to. I wasn't interested. I felt broken in a way that I couldn't immediately repair. I believed in love. I believed in commitment. I believed that if I provided for someone, if I cared for them, if I gave them everything they asked for, they would love me in return. I was wrong. During those 2 years, I did a lot of thinking. I went to a therapist, a real one, not like Sarah's shallow sessions. I talked about my childhood. I talked about my need to provide. I talked about my fear of being alone. I talked about how I'd use money as a substitute for real connection. I realized something. I had been as lost as Sarah was. She was lost in greed. I was lost in work. We were both trying to fill empty spaces inside ourselves with things that couldn't actually fill them. The only difference was that I was the one paying for her emptiness. I also realized that I wasn't going to change that pattern easily. My instinct was to provide, to work, to accumulate. Those instincts had made me successful. but that also made me vulnerable to someone like Sarah. So I started to make changes. Real changes. I stepped back from the business. I hired a manager to run things. I cut my hours in half. I spent time with my parents, who were getting older. My father had developed heart problems. I'd missed so many years with them because I was too busy building an empire. I decided I didn't want to miss anymore. I went back to school and took philosophy classes. I read books about relationships and psychology and spirituality. I learned that there was nothing spiritual or meaningful about accumulating money, that the things that matter were time, connection, presence. After 2 years, I started dating again, but it was different now. I dated women who had their own careers, their own money, their own lives. I didn't try to impress them with what I'd built. I tried to know them as people. I moved slowly. I didn't rush into anything. I met someone named Emily about 3 years ago. She's a doctor. She has her own practice. She doesn't need my money. She doesn't want my money. We're together because we actually like each other, because we make each other laugh, because we're interested in the same things. We're not married. Neither of us is interested in getting married. We're just happy to be together. My relationship with money changed too. I still work. I still manage my properties. But I'm not obsessed with it anymore. I don't lie awake at night thinking about my net worth. I don't make decisions based on how much money I'll make. I make decisions based on whether they're right for me, whether they give me joy, whether they let me sleep at night. I sold the big house, the one I'd bought to impress Sarah. I sold it 3 years after the divorce. I bought a smaller house, beautiful but reasonable, a place I actually live in instead of a showcase. I donated millions to charity, education nonprofits. Mostly, I set up a scholarship fund in my parents' name at the university. I don't do these things to feel good about myself. I do them because I had so much, and I realized how much I didn't actually need. Let me tell you what I learned from all of this. Let me tell you what those 2 pages really meant. The 2 pages weren't actually about legal strategy. They were about clarity. They forced me to see my marriage exactly as it was, not through the lens of hope or love or what I wanted it to be, but what it actually was. And clarity is powerful. I learned that you can't build a real relationship on one person's resources. You can't buy someone's love, and you can't expect gratitude in return for providing things. Real relationships are built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine care for each other's well-being. I learned that warning signs are real. I learned to listen to my gut. When Sarah first started changing, when I first started feeling uncomfortable with her behavior, that wasn't me being judgmental. That was me sensing something was wrong. If I'd listened to that feeling, if I'd asked hard questions instead of just throwing money at problems, things might have been different. I learned that money is not a substitute for presence. My father worked hard, but he came home. He sat at the dinner table with his family. He was present. I worked hard, but I missed my life because I was too busy building it. I traded real human connection for financial security, and it was the worst trade I've ever made. I learned that love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, and trust is the most fragile thing in the world. Once it's broken, you can never fully repair it. You can move on, you can build something new, but that original trust is gone, and you have to accept that loss. I learned that revenge isn't satisfying. I won the court case. I got to keep my money. I got to see the judge recognize that Sarah had been manipulative and greedy. And you know what? It didn't feel good. It just felt sad. Sad that I'd been so foolish. Sad that I'd loved someone who didn't love me back. Sad that something I'd hoped would be beautiful had turned into something ugly. I learned that the best revenge isn't what you take from someone. It's what you protect. It's protecting your peace. It's protecting your ability to trust again, even after trust has been broken. It's protecting the parts of yourself that still believe in love, even after you've been hurt by it. It's protecting your time, your energy, your presence, the things that actually matter. The most important thing I learned is this. A good life isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you spend your time. It's about who you spend it with. It's about whether you're present for the people you love. It's about whether you're building something real or just accumulating things. If I could go back and talk to my younger self, I wouldn't tell him not to marry Sarah. I couldn't have known, but I would tell him to slow down, to spend time with his parents before they get old, to understand that a full bank account doesn't mean a full life, to know that the most important things in life are the ones you can't put on a balance sheet. I'm not a rich man anymore in the way I used to be. I have less money than I did during my marriage, and I'm happier. I sleep better. I wake up without that weight on my chest. I have real relationships with people. I have time for things that matter. Will I go back and do anything differently? I just don't know. Maybe not. Maybe all of this, the good and the bad, the success and the failure, the love and the betrayal. Maybe all of it was necessary to make me into someone I can actually respect. Someone I can actually live with. That's my story. That's what those 2 pages meant. They meant clarity. They meant seeing reality for what it actually is. They meant deciding that enough was enough, and then following through with that decision, no matter how painful it was. Sometimes life teaches you lessons through pain, and sometimes those painful lessons are the most valuable ones. I'm grateful for mine, even though it took me a long time to say that. I'm grateful that I learned what really matters. I'm grateful that I learned to see clearly, and I'm grateful that I survived it. That's the story. That's the man I was, and the man I became, and the lessons that brought me from one to the other. I hope somewhere in here, you found something that resonates with your own life. I hope you find clarity about what matters. And I hope you protect what's real before it's too late. Please like, comment, and share. If this is your first time watching my video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified whenever I post a new story.